The shears were the real tell. They weren't your average, run-of-the-mill garden shears, the kind you'd use to prune a rose bush or snip some basil. No, these were heavy-duty, compound-action bypass loppers. The kind of tool you use to sever a 2-inch thick oak branch from its parent tree. A tool that meant business. And, in the tightly clenched, white-knuckled fists of Brenda Wexler, my neighbor, and the self-appointed high priestess of the Pristine Meadows Homeowners Association, they looked less like a gardening implement and more like a medieval weapon of war. She stood on the edge of my meticulously edged lawn, her body a rigid exclamation point of pure, unadulterated indignation. Her pastel pink polo shirt was tucked aggressively into her khaki capris. A white visor, pulled down so low it must have been giving her a migraine, shadowed her face, but I didn't need to see her eyes to know they were narrowed into slits of righteous fury. "Mr. Harrison," she said. Her voice was thin and tight, like a wire stretched to its breaking point. She pronounced my name as if it were a particularly nasty piece of gristle she'd just found in her soup. "Brenda," I countered, offering a placid smile that I knew would infuriate her. I gave the solar panel of my beloved weather station a final, gentle wipe with a microfiber cloth. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Come to admire the precise calibration of my tipping bucket rain gauge? It's accurate to 1/100th of an inch. A modern marvel, really. My weather station, which I had christened the Oracle of Pristine Meadows, stood proudly behind me. It wasn't some cheap plastic thing from a big-box store. It was my magnum opus, a custom-built monument to meteorological science. A sleek, 10-foot aluminum mast held a suite of professional-grade sensors. A Davis Vantage Pro 2 for the basics, a sophisticated ceilometer to measure cloud height, and an all-sky camera that took breathtaking time-lapses. It was my passion, my hobby, and my very own two-fingered salute to the career that had unceremoniously dumped me. "I have sent you 7 notices regarding this contraption," Brenda hissed, taking a menacing step onto my lawn. The squeak of her orthopedic sneakers on the perfectly manicured turf sounded like a strangled mouse. "And I've filed them accordingly," I said cheerfully. "Under B for Beige Tyranny's latest correspondence. It's a very thick file, Brenda. You're prolific." This was our dance. It had been for 6 months, ever since I installed the Oracle. Pristine Meadows was a community pathologically obsessed with uniformity. Every house was one of 3 shades of taupe. Every lawn was cut to exactly 3 inches, and every mailbox was the exact same model. A model I was convinced had won an award for being the most soul-crushingly boring object ever designed by man. My beautiful, functional, scientific instrument was, in Brenda's eyes, a blight. A jagged metal scar on the flawless face of her suburban paradise. "This is a flagrant violation of Covenant CC and R Section 12, subsection B, regarding structures and external fixtures," she recited, her voice gaining the thunderous cadence of a fire and brimstone preacher. "It's a scientific instrument, Brenda, not a tiki bar," I sighed. "It provides a valuable service to the community. People use my website, you know. Farmers, local pilots, the high school football coach. You, of all people, should appreciate my 98.4% accuracy rating on predicting sprinkler system ruining pop-up showers." "Its service is irrelevant," she snapped. "Its appearance is the issue. It is visually aggressive." I had to stop myself from laughing. "Visually aggressive? Brenda, it's a pole with some sensors on it. Your collection of ceramic flamingos, which I might add are technically in violation of the Avian Statuary Clause, has more visual aggression. Those are ironic lawn ornaments, Mr. Harrison. There's a world of difference." She took another step, raising the shears slightly. The sunlight glinted off the polished steel blades. "I am the president of this association. I have a sworn duty to protect the property values and, more importantly, the aesthetic harmony of pristine meadows." My good humor finally began to curdle. "Brenda, what are you doing with those shears? Step away from the scientific equipment. My data cable is a shielded, multiply, direct burial coaxial. It's an innocent bystander in all of this." She ignored me. Her face was a mask of grim determination, the face of a zealot on a holy mission. With a grunt of what I can only describe as pure, concentrated Karen energy, she marched to the base of the Oracle's mast, located the thick black cable running from the data logger toward my house, and positioned the jaws of the loppers around it. "Brenda, don't," I warned, my voice losing its playful edge. "Those are $50 shears. You could have bought a whole rotisserie chicken with that. Think of the value—" Snip! The sound was sickeningly final. A sharp, metallic crunch that echoed in the peaceful afternoon air. I watched as the two ends of my severed cable fell limply to the grass. On the station's control box, a small green LED, my faithful all-systems-go indicator, flickered once and died. The light in my life had literally gone out. Brenda stood up, a triumphant glint in her eyes. She dusted her hands off on her capris, a gesture of ultimate finality. Problem solved. I stared at the severed cable, a casualty of war. I looked at the Oracle, now deaf and mute. Then I looked at her, the petty tyrant of Primrose Lane, standing there with her weapon of mass disruption. A slow, dangerous, and genuinely amused smile spread across my face. "You know, Brenda," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "for a woman so completely obsessed with rules and regulations, you just vaulted clean over civil infraction and landed squarely in felony destruction of property. That's a bold strategic move. I'm almost impressed." Her triumphant expression wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. It seemed the legal implications of her direct action hadn't quite penetrated the thick fog of her self-righteousness. She didn't say another word. She just gave me one last withering glare, turned, and squeaked her way back across my lawn and onto her own. The loppers held at her side like a knight's bloody sword. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing. The silence from the Oracle was deafening. That little green light had been my constant companion ever since the great perky apocalypse of late 2023, the event that had led me here. I'd been the chief meteorologist for Channel 8 News, a job I genuinely loved, except for the part where I had to be a TV personality. My boss, a man named Bob, whose teeth were so white they created a lens flare, was obsessed with weather engagement. He wanted snappy graphics, cute names for heat waves. Get ready for a sizzle fest, folks! And a constant, chirpy optimism, even in the face of meteorological doom. The final straw came during Hurricane Agatha. While my perky morning show colleague was advising people to have hurricane parties, I went on air looking like I hadn't slept in 3 days, which I hadn't, and pointed a shaky finger at the camera. "Folks," I'd said, my voice raw, "it's a Category 4 hurricane. The models are in agreement. It's not a sizzle fest. It's a freight train of wind and water. Do not go surfing. Do not have a party. Get out or board up. I can't make it any simpler." Bob called it fear-mongering. I called it meteorology. We agreed to disagree, and I found my keycard no longer worked the next Monday. So, with my severance package and an abundance of free time, I built the Oracle. It was my defiant answer to weathertainment, a source of pure, unadulterated data, free for anyone who wanted it. And Brenda Wexler had just decapitated it. I walked calmly back into my house, the two dead ends of the cable clutched in my hand like a slain serpent. I went straight to my office, my sanctum sanctorum. The 3 monitors that normally displayed a vibrant tapestry of data from the Oracle were now showing a stark, brutal message in red letters: "Signal lost." I sat down in my worn leather chair and took a deep, cleansing breath. Panicking was for amateurs. Ranting was for later. Now was the time for cold, calculated action, because I, Leo Harrison, a man who routinely planned for 100-year floods and F5 tornadoes, had of course planned for a 5'4" khaki-clad natural disaster named Brenda. My hand went to a small, unassuming panel on the side of my desk console. It was magnetically latched and unlabeled. I popped it open. Inside, nestled in a clean-cut foam housing, was a single, heavy-duty, military-grade switch. It was the kind of switch that looked like it should launch a missile. Above it, a small, engraved plaque read, "NWS Backup Relay." I had installed it for this very contingency. It was my dead man's switch, my ace in the hole. With one flip, it would instantly reroute my website's front-end display, disconnecting it from the Oracle's dead data feed and patching it directly into the public data stream from the nearest National Weather Service station at the regional airport. The data would be less precise, less granular, a shotgun blast instead of my usual sniper rifle. But my website, my baby, would stay online. With a satisfying and deeply profound kerchunk, I flipped the switch. On my main monitor, the angry red "Signal Lost" message vanished. It was replaced by the familiar layout of my website, but the data fields were slightly different. The wind speed was an average, not a real-time gust. The temperature was from 10 miles away. And at the top of the page, a new banner appeared in calm blue text. "Temporarily operating on NWS backup feed. We apologize for the reduced granularity. Normal service will be restored shortly." I looked out the window. Brenda was standing on her front lawn, arms crossed, staring at my house. She had the smug, expectant look of someone who has just unplugged their annoying teenage son's video game console and was waiting for the inevitable tantrum. She was waiting for me to storm out, to scream, to give her the satisfaction. She was going to be sorely disappointed. I picked up my phone, leaned back in my chair, and dialed 3 numbers. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice asked. Hi, yes, hello, I began, my own voice a perfect facsimile of polite civic duty. I'd like to report a crime. Or, well, a crime that has just been completed, I suppose. My neighbor just assaulted my weather station with a pair of shears. A pause on the other end. She assaulted your weather station, sir? That's correct, with shears. SHEARS. No, the station is not pressing charges. Its emotional state is currently unknown, but I am. My name is Leo Harrison. The address is 124 Primrose Lane. The perpetrator is my neighbor, Brenda Wexler, at 126 Primrose. You can't miss her. She's the one who looks like she's about to write a citation to a cloud for loitering. 20 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled silently to a stop on the pristine asphalt of Primrose Lane, parking directly on the border between my property and Brenda's, a blue and white DMZ. 2 officers emerged, their expressions radiating the unique brand of weary resignation reserved for suburban domestic disputes. The first was Officer Miller. He was in his 50s, with a magnificent salt and pepper mustache and the tired eyes of a man who had seen humanity at its absolute pettiest and was profoundly unimpressed by all of it. His partner was Officer Davis, a kid who couldn't have been more than 25, with a crisp uniform and an earnest, eager-to-help expression that I knew would be sandblasted off his soul within a few years on this beat. I met them at the curb, holding the 2 ends of my severed cable like a religious relic. Brenda, having seen the police arrive, had marched out of her house armed with a 3-inch thick white binder labeled Pristine Meadows, HOA Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions. So, Officer Miller began, his voice a low rumble of pure apathy. He gestured with his thumb toward Brenda. "Let me get this straight. She cut your internet cable?" "Not my internet," I corrected him gently. "It's a shielded coaxial cable carrying a proprietary data signal from a suite of meteorological sensors to a data logger inside my home. We're not talking about a Netflix outage here, officer. We're talking about the systematic and malicious destruction of scientific infrastructure." Officer Davis, the rookie, was dutifully writing this down in his little notepad. "Scientific infrastructure," he mumbled as he wrote. I saw Miller shoot him a look that said, "For the love of God, kid, don't encourage him." Brenda took a step forward, clutching her binder to her chest like a shield. "Officer, he is the one breaking the rules. For months. That thing," she said, pointing a trembling finger at the oracle, "is an illegal structure. I was simply enforcing the community bylaws, a duty I was elected to perform." Miller turned his tired gaze upon her. "Ma'am, with all due respect, the HOA is not a sovereign nation. Your bylaws are a civil matter." "These shears," he said, nodding toward the loppers she'd carelessly left on her porch, "fall under a little thing the state likes to call criminal mischief. It's got its own chapter in the penal code and everything. It's a fun read." "I'd also like to add trespassing to the list of charges," I chimed in, holding up the cable ends. "And frankly, crimes against meteorology." Davis looked up from his notepad, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Is that a real thing, sir?" "It ought to be," I said grimly. Miller let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 stupid arguments over property lines and trash can placement. "Look, here's what's going to happen. Or rather, what's not going to happen, sir," he said to me. "You have no video of her actually cutting the cable, do you?" "No, I was too busy being gobsmacked by the audacity of it all." "Right. So it's your word against hers." "Ma'am," he said, turning to Brenda, "you can't go around destroying other people's property, no matter what your big book of rules says. That's not how civilization works." He gestured between the two of us. "You two are going to go back to your respective, immaculately maintained homes. Ma'am, you are not to go on his property or touch his things again. Understood?" Brenda huffed, but nodded. "Sir," he continued, turning back to me, "you can come down to the station and file a formal report if you want to pursue this. That will involve getting a lawyer, which costs money. She'll get a lawyer, which costs money. You'll spend the next year arguing about a $50 cable, and in the end you'll both just be poorer and angrier. We will document this as a neighbor dispute." He paused, looking from my face to Brenda's. "Now, can we all agree to act like adults with functioning frontal lobes?" A beat of silence hung in the air. "No," Brenda and I said in perfect, harmonious unison. Miller closed his eyes for a moment. I could almost hear his soul weeping. "All right, Davis, let's go," he muttered to his partner. "My ulcer is flaring up and I can smell it." They got back in their cruiser and drove away, leaving a void of authority in their wake. Brenda and I were left standing there, locked in a silent stare-down across the 10 yards of turf that separated our kingdoms. The war had been declared. The first battle had been fought to a pathetic, bureaucratic draw, and a cold, hard realization was dawning in my mind. The system wasn't going to help me. Reason was useless. Logic was irrelevant. To fight a monster like Brenda, I had to become a monster myself, a smarter, pettier, and far more compliant monster. That evening, my office was no longer a data center. It was a war room. The only light came from the glow of my monitor, illuminating my face as I stared into the webcam. On the other side of the video call was my best friend, Alex. Alex was a systems engineer for a ridiculously successful tech startup, and he possessed a brilliant, chaotic mind that ran on caffeine and a deep-seated love for absurdly over-engineered solutions to simple problems. He was, in short, the perfect quartermaster for the war I was about to wage. And then Miller the cop basically told us to go to our rooms and think about what we'd done, I finished, recounting the day's saga. Alex was leaning so far back in his gaming chair, I thought he was going to tip over. He was clutching his stomach, tears of laughter streaming down his face. She did what? With garden shears? Leo, this is incredible. This is better than the season finale of Succession. Aesthetic harmony, he wheezed. Oh my God, I'm putting that in my email signature. It's not funny, Alex, I said, though a small smile was tugging at my lips. She decapitated my data feed. I'm running on the NWS backup like some kind of peasant. I'm getting my barometric pressure readings from 10 miles away. Do you know how much can change in 10 miles? A lot, Alex. A lot. Okay, you're right. It's a tragedy, he said, wiping his eyes. So what's the plan? You gonna sue her? Egg her house? Replace her ironic flamingos with sincerely tacky garden gnomes? No, tempting. But Miller was right. A legal battle would be a quagmire of billable hours. Vengeance needs to be smarter. It needs to be elegant. I leaned forward, my eyes gleaming with newfound purpose. It needs to be perfectly, unimpeachably, maddeningly legal. Alex stopped laughing. He leaned into his camera, his own eyes lighting up with the fire of a fellow mad scientist. Ooh, I like where this is going. Malicious compliance? Malicious compliance on a thermonuclear level, I confirmed. She hates my weather station because it's unaesthetic and visually aggressive. So I'm going to replace it. I'm going to build something bigger, something better, something so powerful and so meticulously compliant with every single line of that idiotic HOA charter that it becomes a monument to her own bureaucratic stupidity. Every time she looks out her window, she will see a testament to her defeat, built from the ashes of her own rule book. My God, Alex whispered, his voice full of awe. Tell me everything. Gladly, I said, pulling up a PDF on my second monitor. It was the HOA charter, a document my terrified next-door neighbor, Gary, had emailed me months ago with the subject line, Know Your Enemy. Strap in, I told Alex. We're going deep diving into the beige heart of darkness. For the next 2 hours, we were a whirlwind of manic energy. We dissected that 100-page document of suburban legalese like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls. We found loopholes inside of loopholes. Okay, look at this, Alex shouted, highlighting a section on his screen. Section 12, subsection B. No external structure shall exceed a height of 15 feet. That's what she's got you on, right? Right, I said. The oracle is technically 10 feet, but the anemometer on top brings it to about 16. She measured it, with a laser measure. I saw her. But read the exception, Alex crowed. Exception 2A. Standard flagpoles and communication antennae are exempt from height restrictions, but must adhere to all municipal and federal regulations. Communication antennae, Leo? A slow, evil grin spread across my face. Alex, you magnificent bastard. What does your station do, Leo? He asked, a leading question. It communicates data from the sensors to the logger, I answered, playing along. So it's a communication device. And what does it look like? Like an antenna. Boom, loophole, he yelled. We can build it 50 feet high if we want, as long as we follow FAA rules for structures near a small airfield, which I'm looking up right now. It's surprisingly easy. All we need is a foundation and... Oh, this is beautiful. A low-intensity red warning light for nighttime visibility. I started laughing. A low, rumbling laugh that grew until it echoed in my office. A gentle, pulsing, impossible to ignore red light in the middle of our sleepy, dark sky policy-loving neighborhood. It was perfect. "What about the look of it?" I asked, scrolling further. "She hates the industrial look." Section 14, Materials and Aesthetics, Alex read. "All external structures must be constructed of approved materials and painted from the approved community color palette to ensure visual harmony." There's a list. He pulled up an appendix. It was a sea of beiges, taupes, and off-whites. Names like Gentle Fawn, Whispering Wheat, and Sensible Stone. "Oh, this is going to be glorious," I breathed. We weren't just going to follow the rules. We were going to weaponize them. We spent another hour sketching, planning, and cackling like hyenas. We designed a new station, a beast, a titan, a 30-foot galvanized steel monopole anchored in a block of reinforced concrete that could probably survive a direct meteor strike. It would have all my old sensors, plus new ones. An X-band micro-Doppler radar in a sleek white radome on top. A brand new sonic anemometer that measured wind with ultrasonic pulses, making it silently, menacingly accurate. And everything, every single bolt and bracket would be painted in the most offensively boring color on the chart. Pristine taupe hash 4. We christened it Project Cumulonimbus. My first few calls to local contractors were, to put it mildly, discouraging. "Hello, yes, you do custom fabrication?" I'd ask. "Great, I need a 30-foot monopole tower installed in my backyard. Yes, residential. No, I'm not a ham radio enthusiast. It's for science." "Hello, hello?" Click. "You want to build a what?" "Sir, we do patios and gazebos. Stone veneer fire pits are our specialty." Click. A 30-foot FAA-compliant antenna tower in a residential zone? Is this a prank call? Did my brother-in-law put you up to this? Click. Frustrated, I abandoned the polished, suburban mom-approved contractors and dove into the grittier end of the Google search results. On page 4, I found it. Sal's Steel and Rigging. The website looked like it had been built in 1998 on a computer running Windows 95. The font was Comic Sans. The only photo was a blurry shot of a crane lifting something large and metal. But the slogan, emblazoned in blinking red text, spoke to my soul. "If it's metal and it goes up, we're your guys," I called. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Sal's." The next day, I found myself in a dusty, cluttered office in an industrial park that smelled of welding fumes and honest labor. Sitting behind a massive, dented metal desk was Sal himself. He was a big man in his 60s, with a thick neck, calloused hands that could probably palm a basketball, and a pair of surprisingly shrewd eyes that peered at me from under a grease-stained Sal's Steel baseball cap. I unrolled the blueprints Alex and I had finalized. They looked wildly out of place on his desk, nestled between a greasy wrench and a half-eaten donut. Sal squinted at the plans, tracing a thick finger over the specifications. "All right, kid, what am I looking at here? You starting your own pirate radio station? Gonna broadcast polka music to the masses?" "It's a weather station," I said. "An upgrade?" "An upgrade?" He let out a short, barking laugh. "Kid, this thing's got a foundation spec that could hold a cell tower. I've put up smaller rigs for a tant. What's this here, a golf ball on a stick?" "That's a miniature X-band radome, yes. For tracking precipitation," I explained. "And that's a ceilometer for cloud base height. And that's the sonic anemometer. It's all very necessary for my work." Sal picked up the printout of the HOA color palette I'd brought, holding it at arm's length like it was a dirty diaper. "And this whole thing, this 30-foot tower of power, has to be painted HOA-approved pristine taupe, hash 4. Klar." I slid the thick binder of HOA rules across the desk, opened to the relevant pages Alex and I had highlighted. To the letter, Sal. Every rule, every regulation. Sal read the clauses about antenna exemptions and approved color palettes. He looked back at the ridiculously over-engineered blueprints. He looked at the binder. Then he looked at me, at the determined, slightly unhinged glint in my eye. A slow, magnificent grin spread across his face. He got it. He absolutely, 100% got it. "My daughter," he said, leaning back in his creaking chair. "She lives in one of these places, the Whispering Willows. They tried to fine her last Christmas for having non-standard wattage on her string lights. Said her inflatable snowman was emotionally aggressive." He slapped his hand down on the blueprints. "Kid, it would be my profound honor to build this glorious monstrosity for you. It's going to cost you a pretty penny, mind you. Permits, materials, custom paint. But the satisfaction?" He winked. "That's going to be priceless." A week later, the first shots of the new war were fired. A massive flatbed truck from Sal's Steel and Rigging, bearing a 30-foot galvanized steel pole, rumbled down the quiet, tree-lined street of Primrose Lane. Necks craned, curtains twitched. The age of beige tranquility was over. The construction was a beautiful, disruptive symphony, and I had a front-row seat. I set up a lawn chair on my porch, made a pitcher of iced tea, and watched the magic happen. First came the cement truck, a churning, groaning behemoth that backed up my driveway and proceeded to pour a cubic yard of reinforced concrete into a hole in my backyard so deep it could have been a grave for a woolly mammoth. Brenda watched from her kitchen window, her face a pale, horrified mask. Next, Sal's crew, a team of efficient, no-nonsense professionals who clearly enjoyed their work, began erecting the tower. It went up in 3 10-foot sections, each one bolted into place with a resounding clang of metal on metal that echoed through the subdivision. It was taller, thicker, and infinitely more imposing than the flimsy little mast it was replacing. Brenda, unable to contain herself, scurried out, binder in hand, to confront the foreman. I watched, sipping my tea. The foreman, a man whose neck was wider than my thigh, politely accepted her frantic, page-fluttering assault, then calmly produced a thick folder of his own. It contained the city-approved building permit, the engineer's structural report, and a laminated copy of the HOA rules, with the antenna exemption clause highlighted in fluorescent yellow. He explained that everything was to code, and, per her own association's rules, perfectly legal. Brenda stood there, speechless, her binder hanging limp at her side. Her one weapon had been turned against her. She retreated, defeated, her shoulders slumped. I gave Sal's foreman a cheerful thumbs up. He tipped his hard hat to me. The neighborhood was buzzing. My timid neighbor Gary shuffled over to my porch, pretending to inspect his azaleas. "Leo," he whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. "What have you done? It's magnificent and terrifying. Brenda hasn't spoken a word in an hour. She's just staring." Over the next few days, I was treated to a series of increasingly unhinged voicemails from Brenda. "Mr. Harrison, I am seeing construction vehicles on a Tuesday. This is a gross violation of the peace and quiet of our community." "Mr. Harrison, I have the city code inspector on speed dial. This will not stand. I am also looking into environmental regulations regarding shadows." And my personal favorite, a message left late one night, her voice hushed and near tears. What is that thing? It's so vertical. It looms." The final day of construction was the installation of the finishing touches, the cherries on top of my spiked sundae. The gleaming white radome was hoisted to the very top, looking like an alien egg. The new sonic anemometer was bolted into place, its 3 arms reaching out like a futuristic claw. And then came the pièce de résistance, Alex's stroke of genius. The crew installed a small, unobtrusive light fixture near the top of the tower. That evening, as dusk settled over pristine meadows, I flipped a switch in my garage. A gentle, pulsing FAA-mandated, low-intensity red light began to glow at the tower's peak. It wasn't bright or obnoxious, but it was impossible to ignore. It was a rhythmic, electronic heartbeat in the center of the neighborhood, a constant, silent reminder of my victory. Project Cumulonimbus was complete, and it was more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. The summons arrived via email. Subject: Mandatory Emergency HOA Meeting. It was time for the final showdown. The community clubhouse was exactly as I remembered it from the one holiday party I'd attended. A symphony in beige, with the faint, sterile smell of industrial carpet cleaner and quiet desperation. But tonight, the air was thick with tension. It was packed. Every homeowner who wasn't on vacation was there, drawn by the irresistible drama of the giant metal tower that had appeared in their midst. Brenda stood at a podium at the front, looking severe and solemn, like a general about to address her troops before a hopeless battle. I took a seat in the front row, flanked by my own support team. On my right was Alex, who had driven 2 hours for the occasion, and was vibrating with chaotic glee. On my left was Sal, looking comically out of place in his clean work shirt, his massive arms crossed over his chest like a benevolent grizzly bear bodyguard. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Brenda began, her voice quivering with barely suppressed rage. Her eyes scanned the crowd before landing on me. "As you know, our community is founded on a set of principles of harmony, of aesthetic consistency, of mutual respect for property values." She launched into a passionate, rambling tirade about the sanctity of the bylaws, the threat of nonconformity, and the visual blight that had been erected at 124 Primrose Lane. She used words like monstrosity, eyesore, and a flagrant disregard for the community's character. She pointed a trembling finger at my tower, visible through the large window behind her. "And this thing is a threat to the very fabric of our community. I am therefore making a motion to have the association levy a series of fines against Mr. Harrison, and to use our legal fund to have the structure forcibly removed." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. This was it, the moment of truth. "Mr. Harrison," Brenda said, her voice dripping with venom, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" "I do, as a matter of fact," I said, standing up. I walked to the podium not with a binder, but with my sleek, lightweight laptop. I connected it to the projector. The blank screen flickered to life, displaying a beautifully designed title slide. In a clean, bold font, it read, "Project Cumulonimbus, a study in meticulous compliance." Alex gave me a subtle thumbs up. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice calm and confident. "I know there's been a lot of talk about my new hardware. Brenda, you've raised some concerns, and I want to address them directly. You see, I too have a deep and abiding respect for the rules." I clicked to the next slide. It showed a high-resolution photo of the tower, with call-out boxes pointing to different features. "You've called my station a monstrosity. I prefer to think of it as a testament to the robust and thoughtfully written charter you yourself hold so dear." I advanced to the next slide. It was titled "The Height Issue," and featured a direct quote from Section 12, subsection B. "Brenda, you've repeatedly cited the 15-foot height limit for structures," I said, pacing slightly. "A fair point. However, as Exception 2A clearly states, and I quote, 'Standard flagpoles and communication antennae are exempt from height restrictions.' Now, one might ask, Is this a communication antenna? I paused for dramatic effect. As Sal, our licensed and bonded contractor here, can attest, and as the manufacturer's spec sheets, which I have provided in the handout, confirm, this is technically a multi-purpose communications antenna. Its primary function is to communicate meteorological data from its sensors to its base. It just so happens to communicate with the sky. A few people in the audience chuckled. I saw Gary give a tiny, almost imperceptible fist pump. I clicked again. The next slide was a grid of paint swatches. The aesthetic harmony clause. I was also deeply concerned about adhering to Section 14 regarding visual harmony. I wanted to ensure my station blended seamlessly into the subtle and sophisticated palette of pristine meadows. That's why, at great personal expense, I had the entire 30-foot structure custom painted in pristine taupe #4. It's a lovely shade, isn't it? Really captures the absence of personality we all strive for. More laughter, this time louder. Brenda's face was turning a shade of crimson that was definitely not on the approved color palette. And finally, I said, clicking to a slide showing FAA regulations, the light. I pointed out the window. That gentle, pulsing red light you've all noticed. Some have called it annoying. I call it legal. FAA Regulation 70/7461L for structures over 200 feet, but also recommended for any structure over 20 feet near small airfields like the one 10 miles away. It's about safety. To remove that light would be a federal offense. I'm a patriot, Brenda. Are you? The room was silent for a moment, and then someone in the back started to clap. Then another. The tide had turned. The homeowners, initially worried about their property values, were now clearly amused. They weren't seeing an eyesore anymore. They were seeing a man who had done his homework so thoroughly, so completely, that he had beaten the system at its own game. Sal stood up. I can confirm, his deep voice boomed, the tower is over-engineered to hell and back. It's insured, the foundation is cured, and it's not going anywhere, even in a hurricane. It's the most solid thing in this whole neighborhood, including some of the marriages. That broke the tension completely. The room erupted in laughter. Brenda stood at the podium, utterly defeated, her authority shattered. The motion to have the tower removed was voted down, 37-1, her one lonely, defiant vote. She collapsed into her chair, a beige queen dethroned in her own beige castle. An hour later, we were celebrating. My office, which had served as a war room, was now a victory lounge. Sal, Alex, and I were finishing off a large pepperoni pizza, washing it down with cold beer. Sal had regaled us with stories of other absurd jobs, but he swore my spite tower was his all-time favorite. To Project Cumulonimbus, Alex said, raising his bottle. Hear, hear, Sal and I chorused. I leaned back in my chair, basking in the glow of victory and the hum of my new, fully operational data feed. The sensitivity on the new equipment was staggering. The Oracle 2.0 was a masterpiece. I was watching the data streams, admiring the elegant flow of information when I saw it. A flicker, an anomaly. Huh, I said, leaning closer to the screen. What is it? Alex asked, his mouth full of pizza. Did you spot a UFO? Is Brenda launching flaming bags of dog poop with a catapult? No. Look at this. My voice was quiet. The celebratory mood in the room evaporated. Look at this wind shear profile, the Doppler velocity, the rapid pressure drop. There. I pointed to a tight little swirl on the X-band radar display. It's a hook echo. It's small, too small for the big NEXRAD at the airport to resolve clearly this far out. But it's there. It's unmistakable. English, kid, Sal said, his brow furrowed. I looked at them, my face pale. It's a microcyclone, A small, fast-forming tornado. And the trajectory? Oh God. I ran a quick projection. It's heading directly for pristine meadows. The irony hit me like a physical blow. The very thing Brenda had fought against, the ridiculous, over-the-top, spite-fueled tower of science, was now the only thing in the world that knew annihilation was bearing down on us. I frantically checked the National Weather Service alerts. Nothing. No watches. No warnings. The storm was too small, too localized, too fast. They wouldn't see it until it was already on top of us. My own website, which I had just so smugly defended, was now displaying the most terrifying data I had ever seen. I ran the projection again. 10 minutes until impact. Maybe less. "You have to warn them," Alex said, jumping to his feet. "How?" I shot back, my mind racing. "Run outside and scream tornado! They just spent an hour listening to me be a smug, sarcastic jerk. They'll think it's part of the act. They'll think I'm trying to prove a point." And then, the horrible, sickening realization hit me. There was only one way. One system designed to alert the entire neighborhood instantly, a system I had mocked just hours before. "The HOA emergency alert system," I whispered. "It's hardwired to sirens on the clubhouse roof." My eyes met Alex's. Brenda is the only one with the key and the code to activate it. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages as I fumbled for my phone. I scrolled to her number, my thumb hovering over the call button. I had to call the woman whose political career I had just gleefully nuked from orbit and ask her to save us all. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice as flat and dead as a dial tone. "What do you want, Mr. Harrison? Come to gloat some more?" "No time, Brenda, no time!" I said, my voice tight with urgency. "You need to listen to me. I need you to get to the emergency alert panel in the clubhouse and activate the siren. Now!" "Is this some kind of sick joke?" she asked, her voice laced with weary disbelief. "A victory lap? Are you going to make all the sirens play We Are the Champions?" "Brenda, I swear on my career, on this tower, on everything I own, this is not a joke." I could hear the wind beginning to pick up outside my own window, a low moan that was growing in pitch. My station just picked up a tornadic signature on a collision course with this neighborhood. The NWS hasn't seen it yet. We have maybe 5 minutes. You are at the clubhouse. You are the only one who can sound the alarm. The line was silent, but I could hear her breathing. I could picture her there, alone in that sterile beige room, her world in tatters. I had to break through a wall of pride and humiliation that I myself had built. "Brenda, please," I said, my voice dropping, all snark and sarcasm stripped away, leaving only raw fear. "Forget about the tower. Forget about the meeting. Just for 2 minutes, trust the science. Trust the contraption. Please, save your neighbors." A long, agonizing pause stretched over the line. Outside, a loose trash can lid rattled down the street. I heard her take a shaky breath. She had to choose between her own wounded ego and the community she, in her own misguided way, truly believed she was protecting. "What's the code?" she whispered. Her voice was small, but it was there. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. Alex had looked up the public manual for the system during our planning phase, just in case. I rattled off the activation sequence. I heard the sound of a key fumbling in a lock, the click of a panel opening, and the beeping of a keypad. And then a sound I will never forget. The ear-splitting, gut-wrenching wail of the emergency sirens erupting across pristine meadows. The next few minutes were a blur of organized chaos. Through the window, I saw confused faces peer out of doors, then look up at the sky, which was now a bruised and terrifying shade of greenish-black. The siren's urgent cry spurred them into action. People grabbed pets, herded children, and ran for basements and bathrooms. The wail of the siren, Brenda's last act as queen, was their salvation. The storm hit with the force of a bomb. The wind shrieked, a physical pressure that made my ears pop. I watched from my office window as my neighbor's heavy oak picnic table cartwheeled across his lawn and smashed into his fence. Shingles were torn from roofs like scabs. Mailboxes were ripped from the ground. The world outside was a blender of leaves, rain, and debris. The tornado's main funnel, a churning gray finger, thankfully touched down in the golf course lake just beyond our subdivision, sending a massive waterspout into the air before dissipating. And then, as quickly as it had arrived, it was over. The wind died down. The shriek became a moan, then silence, broken only by the drip of rain and the distant cry of a car alarm. The next morning, Primrose Lane was a war zone, but a strangely peaceful one. Debris littered the lawns, but the houses were, for the most part, intact. Neighbors were emerging, blinking in the bright sunlight, checking on each other with a sense of shared, breathless relief. I was in my yard, inspecting the Oracle 2.0. It stood untouched, a silent, taupe-colored sentinel that had weathered the storm without a scratch. It had done its job. I saw her walking toward me from across the street. Brenda. Her award-winning rose bushes were shredded, their petals scattered across her lawn like pink confetti. Her hair was a mess. She looked smaller, humbled. She stopped a few feet away, not looking at me, but at the tower. "The news," she said, her voice quiet. "They're calling it a freak event, unpredictable. They said there was no warning." "Yeah," I said simply. "Freak event." She finally looked at the tower, a long, appraising look that held no malice, only a kind of exhausted wonder. "How much damage?" she asked. "To the tower?" I patted its solid metal base. "0. It's rated for a Category 3 hurricane. Your bylaws are surprisingly robust when it comes to wind load standards, Brenda. You should be proud." A long, awkward silence hung between us, filled with the sound of a distant chainsaw. She finally turned her eyes to mine. There was no apology, not in words, but there was something else, a grudging respect, an acknowledgement. "Thank you, Leo," she said. Then she turned and walked back to her ruined garden. It wasn't the start of a beautiful friendship, but it was a truce. A peace treaty signed in the wreckage. My neighbor Gary, his glasses askew, came over and clapped me on the back, a gesture so bold for him it was like he'd just wrestled a bear. A week later, life in pristine Meadows was returning to a new kind of normal. My website traffic had exploded. I was an accidental local hero. The site now sported a new banner. Proudly sponsored by Sal's Steel and Rigging, we build things that last. I was in my office, watching the beautiful, calm, post-frontal weather patterns roll across my screens, when my phone rang. The caller ID read, Channel 8 News. I let it ring a few times before answering. It was Bob, my old boss. "Leo, my man!" he boomed, his voice oozing a charisma I could feel through the phone. "Incredible story. We're all talking about it. The local boy who built his own tornado detector in his backyard. A true hero." I said nothing, just listened. "Listen, Leo," he continued, his tone shifting to one of sincere groveling. We made a mistake. The viewers miss your no-nonsense style. I miss it. We want you back. Chief Meteorologist, prime time. We'll even give you a new weekly segment. Call it Leo's Science Lab or Deep Dive with Dr. Doppler. Whatever you want." I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. My tower, my beautiful, taupe-colored monument to spite and science, stood tall and proud against the brilliant blue sky. I thought about Brenda, the cops, Sal, the glorious, petty, wonderful war I had just won. I thought about the freedom of telling the truth, without having to make it perky. A slow smile spread across my face. "I'll have to check my schedule, Bob," I said coolly. "And you'll have to talk to my agent. My rates have gone up. Substantially." I hung up the phone, leaned back in my chair and watched the weather, a king in my perfectly compliant, spite-built castle.